If you've ever been to a hip, techie city like Austin, Texas, you've seen people riding around on e-scooters, or e-scooters parked haphazardly around the street, or left in a corner somewhere. The way these things usually work is that you walk up to a parked scooter, open whatever app is associated with that scooter, be it Uber or Lime or what have you, you scan the barcode on the scooter, and you'll be charged based on the time you rode the scooter at a fixed price per minute. And at the end of the day, someone from the company comes around and picks up all the scooters that are laying around the city, and then they take it back to be charged for the next day. Now you may be thinking, they would have to charge a lot of money per minute for this business to be profitable, which makes sense. There are a lot of expenses to consider, such as hiring a person to pick up the scooters, charging the scooters, the initial capital expenditure of purchasing the scooters, and as well as loss from theft or vandalism, general depreciation, and damage to the scooters. Now this is where the problem with all of these companies comes in. If they charge enough to be profitable, no one wants to use the scooters. They're going to be too expensive. And additionally, most customers have an indifference to the brand of the scooters. They will essentially go and use the scooter that is the cheapest and closest to them. And there's so much competition that a lot of scooters are left unoccupied for long periods of time. For example, Berlin alone has 3 scooter companies operating at the same time. So essentially, most of these companies are operating at a loss. So far, these companies have sustained themselves off of naive venture capital money spurred by a historical bull market in the last decade. But now as the interest rates are rising and the economy is looking a little worse, these companies and Silicon Valley in general is facing a reality check. Let's look at Bird Global Inc., a giant e-scooter company that went public through a SPAC, which is a special purpose acquisition company, in late 2021 at a valuation of $2.3 billion. It started trading at around $10 a share when it went public, and as of filming this video, it's trading at $0.2043 per share. Huge decline. So what happened to this company? In my opinion, the hubris of Silicon Valley founders, blind venture capital money, and questionable decisions all had a big part to play in the downfall of this company. So Bird has raised a total of $883 million in private funding in over 12 rounds of funding. So in their initial seeding round, they were funded at a valuation of $0.041 a share. And in their Series D round, they were funded at $12.92 per share. At their current share price, even their oldest investors were overvaluing this company and will have lost money. So the reason they were so overvalued is because of the environment that was in Silicon Valley at that time. Money was plentiful, interest rates were cheap, and companies were getting funded in record amounts of time. So if you didn't get your foot in the door of funding as a VC immediately, then it was going to be too late and you would be locked out of that funding round. So there was a lot of pressure to kind of skip due diligence with these companies. So in the past, the due diligence process for startup investment, it could take months. It involved gathering market data, looking at financial documents, interviewing the founders, interviewing the customers, and getting a big picture of how the company operated. But when Bird was being funded, all this due diligence was crammed into a weekend or a single day with a lot of these companies. So it was basically thrown out the window. So instead of VCs looking diligently at the business and evaluating their investment properly, they were throwing money at whatever the new hip thing was. This is where huge personalities of the founders came into play. People like Elizabeth Holmes, for example. Which is how Bird Global raised this absolutely insane amount of money for basically a business that has no sustainability. So Bird Global stock has been on a steady decline ever since the SPAC, but they've also made some mistakes that have accelerated that decline. For example, this Monday on November 14th, this is 2022, Bird told its investors that its financial statements from the last 2.5 years could not be relied upon, and there is substantial doubt about the company's ability to continue as a going concern. As it turns out, they have been overstating their revenue on financial statements by up to 12% compared to their actual revenue. So the reason for this is because they have something called Bird Cash, which is similar to what a lot of companies and even transit authorities around the world do, which is essentially have a prepaid balance for their customers on their app that the customers can keep on their account to pay for rides instead of using a credit card in real time. So it turns out if you disable the auto reload feature on the app for Bird Cash and your ride exceeds the balance that's in your Bird Cash wallet, the wallet will go into a negative balance. So essentially, Bird is extending you some credit for the duration of that ride. And what's supposed to happen is at the end of the ride, Bird is going to charge you the difference between your wallet and your ride to your card. But if you've deleted your card off the app, Bird can't get that money back. So obviously, the user will have to top up their Bird Cash to take another ride. But many users, instead of doing that, they're just never going to use the scooters again. So Bird can't recover that money again. But the problem is that instead of counting that loss, Bird counts the credit that they extended to the user as a part of their revenue, even if they were not able to collect that money. So this has led to an inflated revenue on their balance sheet for the last few years. So let's say this type of creative accounting might have been working on venture capitalists and enthusiastic retail investors in the bull run, but there seems to be a reckoning coming for these Silicon Valley startups. For Bird at least, it seems like the reckoning is already here. So after this statement, they've released another statement where they've stated, and I quote, "As of September 30, 2022, the company had $38.5 million in unrestricted cash and cash equivalents, which, without additional funding, will not be sufficient to meet the company's obligations within the next 12 months. If the company is unable to raise additional capital or generate cash flows necessary to expand its operations and invest in continued innovation, it may not be able to compete successfully and may need to scale back or discontinue certain or all of its operations in order to reduce costs or seek bankruptcy protection, which would harm its business, financial conditions, and result of operations. As such, these factors raise substantial doubt about the company's ability to continue as a going concern." So this is a very dire statement for the company to put out. Their financials are looking terrible. Their entire business model relied on new money coming in for venture capitalists. And now that the money pool has kind of dried up, interest rates are really high, the economy is not doing so well, all these companies that rely on venture capital funding to stay afloat are facing a reckoning. Clearly, Bird is in a lot of trouble. So I kind of want to look at this in a different way. I have a grudge against scooter companies. I think it's an unsustainable business, first of all. Second of all, it's kind of just a gimmick for a lot of consumers. So for example, went to Austin, Texas a couple of weeks ago. I used the scooters there. It was good for a couple of rides, but I don't think it's very sustainable. All the pedestrians hate you. It is kind of dangerous. It's a nuisance to all locals, and it's really not needed. So my point is, all this money that venture capitalists spent on these scooter companies, we have Lime, Uber, Bird, there was so many scooter companies, raised billions and tens of billions of dollars. That money could have gone to funding for public transit, could have gone to improving our sidewalks, improving our pedestrian infrastructure, improving subway stations. In North America, we are stuck in this weird limbo where our roads are terrible, our traffic is terrible, our public transit is terrible. We don't have a lot of walkable cities. But instead of putting in that money into real solutions, we have these Silicon Valley founders that are just lost in their own hubris, that they think they can solve all of the world's problems with these really, really dumb solutions. And they just get an insane amount of funding just off of the cult of personality. You know, they're not really pitching realistic, actual solutions. It's really disappointing, and I think this money should be going to better use. And I hope these companies get a reality check, and that venture capitalists also get a reality check, and there's better due diligence in the future.